Okay, welcome back viewers. Getting along now with the rails. I have to making a bit of an apology here. I actually shot a whole bunch of stuff before I glued these pieces on, and I sort of explained about the rail band that we put on, the cedar rail band. But unfortunately, like I said in the first episode, that we might all learn something. Well, I definitely learned something. Yeah, anyway, I lost that file, couldn't retrieve it. So now I've had to pick it up here. Luckily, I haven't quite finished this little piece here, so we'll go through from here. So you can see I've put the cedar pieces on. Obviously, I've stuck these other squares, the tiger stripes, on top. So not able to show you the cedar rail band right through around to the tail. I steamed the tail off, but I'll give you a bit of a look from the side view. Okay, now we've seen that close up. When it comes to putting these little pieces on, I've got a whole bunch of small pieces of cedar that I've cut up. Obviously, I've cut them so the grain's running along the length of the board, so I'm not actually using the bead in the cove, I'm using it opposite. So they'll go in place like this. I've got a whole bunch of little pieces of cedar, little square pieces of cedar that I cut up, and they'll just go in next to, we'll put them in. Obviously, we've got to glue it on, obviously. So what I have been using is, I've been using epoxy putty. I made up some putty, because if I stuck these little pieces on by just like this without any clamping with the foaming glue, what would happen is the foaming glue, because it expands, it would lift them off the rail band. Now, if you go back to, I think, episode 1 or 2, when I first cut the rails off the shaped core, and I stuck a whole bunch of series of little pieces on the rail, laid up a rail band using the bead and cove, so I locked them in. Actually did use the foaming glue there, but when I did that one, I stood there and just kept pushing it down as the foaming glue went off. You know, it goes off in about 15 minutes or something, so you just have to stand there and push it down. And I had it, you know, down the end there, I put a few pins down to stop it rolling off. I find that a bit better using the foam glue in that process, because if you use the resin, the epoxy putty, it's a little bit hard, and it's when it comes to cleaning up the edge of that rail band, the foaming glue is much more forgiving, because it's very soft and fluffy. So in this process, but you can't use the foaming glue because it's going to lift off, and you probably could if you really wanted to, and you probably get away with it. But I find with the epoxy, when you butter it up and stick it down, it just glues on. You don't have to clamp it. So you just follow the curve of the rail. I'll do this one right down to about here, and just before the end of the nose, and I'll put a few pins in there to stop it sliding off. And just sort of stand there and push them down. The epoxy goes off pretty quick, actually, especially on a hot day. It goes off you only probably get about 15-20 minutes working time. So I get this piece on plus this end piece on, and then the epoxy goes off. If it was a cooler day and in winter, I'd probably be able to do the whole lot in one go, but I'd rather do it and then stop rather than get halfway through it and it goes off and causes all sorts of a mess. So you know, the same as the whole process of making these boards. You're best off to take your time, don't rush into it. Otherwise you'll cause problems and then you'll have to fix it. So you're better off, for me personally, I just like to take my time, get it right the first time. So okay, so once we've glued these last ones on, and then we'll have the full finished rail band with the you know, the tiger stripe look that we talked about before. What we end up with, I'll take these foam blocks out so we can pull it out, because I've only just stuck these ones on, and so we end up, you know, this side's completely done right through, and I've only got to, obviously I just got to add this other one on, and then I'll, you know, plane it back down. You can see I've planed this one down sort of roughly close to the mark, not complete, and then smooth up the outside, because these little cedar blocks are a little bit bigger than the Paulownia squares, little Paulownia squares there. And then we've just got to check to see that we have enough room to roll over the type of rail that we want. So if we want a lower rail, we'll probably have to, you know, put another rail band on here. But if we want a sort of a softer rail, I might be able to pull that over. But you're never quite sure when you're doing it, because it's always hard, because you're making the board thicker from the core. So the best advice I could give is, when you actually shape the core, is to sort of thin the rails out a bit more. What I'm doing here, basically with this board, I'm trying to get away with 2 rail bands. Whereas boards that I've done previously, these ones up in the rack, they've got like 4 rail bands on. So by only doing 2 rail bands, obviously I'm going to reduce a bit of weight. A lot of people are very conscious about how heavy their board is. I mean, obviously it doesn't worry me too much, but you like to get it in, you know, within reason. Like, that's pretty good, that weight there. I'll be guessing it's probably around 4 kilo or something. So they're still heavier than a fiberglass board, but I don't mind that little bit of weight. Yeah, so when I clean all this up, I'll have more of an idea to see whether I can actually pull that rail over. I'm sort of looking for low soft rails, so I won't really know that until I clean all this up, and we'll see how we go. I'd really like to have that tiger stripe finish like I have on a previous board, but if I do have to put another rail band on to give me that distance to pull the rail over, well, I'll do it, and I'll end up with some cedar dots. It'll still look okay. It won't look quite as good, but, you know, I'd rather have practicality, you know, the right rails than having boxy soft rails. And the board itself, you know, it'll only make it another, if I put an extra rail band on, it'll only make it an extra ½ inch wider. So it's 20 inches wide now, so 20 and a half probably won't matter too much. And you know, the board's got a fair bit of volume in it anyway, so it'd probably actually be okay, but we'll see how we go. So what I'll do next is I'll glue the rest of that on. I'll clean all these rails up and I'll have a look to see how it's going. But before I actually finish pulling over, I'm going to cut the nose off, cut the tail off, and put a nose block on it, and then just shape the whole thing. Because then it'll be ready to completely shape up, which is when you start getting into the fun part. And it just makes the whole, you know, shaping it all at once, it all blends in heaps better, rather than completely shaping and then chopping it off and then trying to blend it in real nice, like sort of ding repairing. But anyway, we'll see how we go. I'm sort of looking at it thinking I'll probably have to put another rail band, but you never know, it might be okay. All right, so next time we catch up, I'll probably might go through putting some nose tips on and some tail tips, using a bit of fancy timber there too, and then we'll finish foiling it over. Okay, so I'll see you in the next episode.